I was the first woman to complete the apprenticeship. The college that I went to, they didn't even have a ladies' toilet in the engineering block at all.
So coming up today is my conversation with Sam Shelley, who's a quality consultant working with MedTech startups at the moment. But there really is so much more to Sam, and it was a really fun conversation that bridged all sorts of things, from a really fun, informative conversation about how bat rescue happens and what's involved in that, through to how to grow people within your team who maybe have different skill sets and who's maybe have different long-term goals, but about how you can overlap your goals with their goals to everyone's benefit. That was a really interesting side path in this conversation. But then also about how building quality control within manufacturing, or more specifically medical devices, can be a really critical part of this. But she has such an interesting way of looking at things, some really interesting methodologies that she uses to approach these subjects. It was really informative to me. I had a great time in this conversation, a few laughs as well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Let's get straight into it with Sam now. Hey Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Really good, yeah. Excited to have a chat with you today. So why don't you tell us first where you're joining from?
I'm joining from a little village in Norfolk, in East Anglia in the United Kingdom, called Shipdham, which is famous for being the longest village in Norfolk, apparently.
Okay. Good to have a reason to be in the books and to be famous for. So I wanted to jump in with a slightly deeper question to kick us off, then we'll go back into your background a little bit. But I was just wondering what career fulfillment means to you.
To me, and I've had a few career changes in my lifetime, career fulfillment is about actually having a vocation rather than a job, and having a vocation that aligns with your own ethics and your expectations. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. What's the word I'm looking for? Values. So having a vocation that aligns with your values, your personal values.
That's a really interesting take on it. So I'm sure we're going to get into what your values are and more on your vocation. But let's just take a step back first then. So what was your first step into the working world?
It was a very traditional 4-year mechanical engineering apprenticeship. So I left senior school and O-levels and went straight into a 4-year engineering apprenticeship, which included the first 6 months was in a workshop making our own toolbox and tools. So we had to do everything from forging our own screwdriver to learning all the basic metalworking skills, using a lathe, using a mill, welding, soldering, bending sheet metal, bashing things, which, given that I hadn't even done woodwork at school, so that was all completely new to me.
What made you choose that route then? What was it that appealed to you?
A combination of nature and nurture. I've always, even as a child, I was very inquisitive about how things went together and what they looked like when you took them apart and what happened when you put them back wrongly and then plugged them into the mains electricity. So yeah, we had a few casualties in the house when I was very young. And I had 2 uncles that I was very close to who were both mechanics. So I was used to an environment that smelt of engine oil and lots of things were sitting degreasing in plastic buckets around the house.
So you knew the path. So looking back then, how did that apprenticeship path work out for you? Was that a good experience for you?
Would I say now that it met my expectation at the time? No, I just had no idea what it was actually going to be like in real life. I was the first woman the first girl to complete the apprenticeship. They'd had one female apprentice before me, but she hadn't lasted beyond a year. So I had to go through a lot more interviews for the apprenticeship than any of the male apprentices. The college that I went to do my Ordinary National Certificate and Higher National Certificate in Mechanical Engineering, they didn't even have a ladies' toilet in the engineering block at all. So at break time, I had to go to another building to go to the toilet. So, and this was in the 1980s, the mid to late 1980s. So not a very long time ago. But the apprenticeship gave me not only the kind of hard skills and the education courtesy of doing the college day release, but it also taught me a lot of very valuable soft skills. So as an apprentice, we were always on the scrounge for materials for the workshop. So you very quickly learn how to speak very nicely to supervisors in different areas around the company in order to get access to materials or services. I think if you just go down a pure education route and you're not actually in industry, you're not actually having to work alongside people who may or may not want to communicate with you or work with you, who may have prejudices against you. You miss that if I'd have gone to university, I would have missed that unless I did an industrial year. But having had 4 years of that from 16, I think it gives you a really great startup for working just generally in industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds it. I was talking to someone earlier today and we were saying manufacturing is quite an interesting industry because there can be such a breadth of backgrounds and kind of types of people working within a manufacturing company. All the people can be motivated by very different things, and some people can be a little bit awkward if they decide to you when you're trying to convince people to help you out. So yeah, getting into that as early as possible. It must have been I'm sure a bit of a steep learning curve at the time, but beneficial over time, I'm sure. So bearing that in mind, that there were some challenges in there, what was it that you enjoyed most about working in engineering?
I think first and foremost, it was actually being hands-on. It was actually being at the beating heart of a manufacturing industry. So the company I did my apprenticeship in, we had such a breadth of engineering processes going on. We had an aluminium foundry, we x-rayed our castings, we had our own we had our own winding shop for the motors, so we built motors, we had metal pressing machines, so we did our own duct work, we had the standard assembly kind of lines, but then we also had both wet and powder paint application systems, different type of testing environments, and our own packaging and dispatch department. So going through the whole manufacturing process from raw material to finished goods, you were exposed to pretty much every form of manufacturing, or most forms of manufacturing, and quality assurance as well. And I actually chose to specialize in quality assurance in the last 2 years of my apprenticeship, which is how I ended up working in quality.
Okay, so what was it that appealed to you about quality?
I think it was there was a problem with a failure rate of finished products. And I think it'd gone round a couple of teams trying to resolve it. And they've, okay, let's stick Sam on it. She's apprenticed in the quality assurance department. Let's see what she can come up with. And I think I took a slightly different approach to it than most of the other teams because they were mostly all men. So I went down and had a look at the finished product, and I'm looking at it from a logical perspective. Okay, it's an electrical failure. So we can rule out most of the product, but we need to focus on the motor. So I had about 200 failed motors that had been stripped out. So I went and persuaded the supervisor to allow me to dismantle some products that actually passed test. I weighed the motors. I did basic principles, weigh them first. And I found that there was a 20-gram difference in weight between the passes and fails at a minimum. The smallest gap was 20 grams, which is not a lot for something that weighs about 3.5 kilos. So I then took some of the failed motors and stripped them down further and identified that the discrepancy in weight came from the rotor. So I'm then, so I've got this steel rod surrounded by these steel pressings, which have got the aluminium injected into. Okay, so I can count the number of pressings. I can see that the number of pressings is correct, that I know that I can see that they're uniform in thickness. So therefore it's unlikely to be the pressings. The shafts are all CNC machined off the same bar stock. So it's unlikely to be them. So it's most likely to be the aluminium. Now, you can't x-ray them very clearly. So I then took to a bandsaw and started cutting them up. And I discovered a void in the aluminium. And so then it was a case of, I need to understand a bit more about the problem. So I then looked at the batch records of the rotors that had failed and identified that the failures only occurred on 2 of the 3 shifts. So they ran a 3-shift system, and the failures only ever came from product on the first 2 shifts, not from the night shift. So then I managed to arrange to spend some time on night shift in the aluminium foundry and talking to the operator who actually ran the machine that these were cast on. And I discovered that this chap was, how can I put this politely, was adding his own uric acid into the mix.
Gosh, oh no.
Because foundry workers drink a lot of water because of the high temperatures, and because of this chap's age, and because of a prostate problem, he wasn't obviously able to step away to go to the toilet as frequently as he would like. So he was risking life and a very delicate limb and, urinating into the crucible. And actually, that was solving the problem. Not that we could recommend that as a solution. But when I then identified that this was the only difference between these 3 shifts, I then went to the aluminium provider and spoke to them about it, because it was common practice to put all of the fettlings back into the crucible. So you're not wasting aluminium. So any flash, any fillings came off, went straight back into the crucible. And so they said, if you're doing that, you need to be adding chemicals to it to burn off any impurities. And it turns out that the number one chemical for doing that is uric acid. So for me, that was a rewarding experience in that I was able to find what the root cause was, where other teams hadn't, probably because of my approach, but also because of my very inquisitive nature. I just really wanted to get to the bottom of it. I've always loved solving puzzles, loved solving problems. And so in quality assurance, there's two different, you've got quality control and quality assurance. The quality assurance is the risk mitigation aspect. It's let's sit down and think about all the ways this can go wrong, and then let's make it bomb proof. Let's make it so that it cannot go wrong. And the quality control side is, okay, we've done the process. We're now going to check the output. And if something goes wrong, about then investigating it, looking at all of the potential contributing factors and identifying the root cause to be able to prevent it from happening in the future. And you take that one step further, and to my current role as a quality and regulatory consultant. So my job nowadays is to help startups, specifically medical device startups, to actually build their quality management system in the first place. So it's about using those risk mitigation, risk identification skills to develop procedures to govern how the business is going to work in its day job of designing, developing and manufacturing medical devices. So it's about building that resilience and robustness into the quality management system so that it actually enables the company to be successful and to be cost effective, rather than being disciplinary and dictating what they do.
Yeah, I see. Okay, that's really interesting. That was a great story. Yeah, it struck me that your earlier experiences of stripping down devices at home and maybe not so successfully putting them back together, they really came into play in that exercise there of cutting things up and investigating away. That sounds fun. And I guess it's quite good, quite like empowering as a kind of a young apprentice to be able to go through the whole process and really get to that root of the problem.
Yeah, the company that I worked for were really great. They really did, their ethos around the way they trained their apprentices was really great. You hear some horror stories of some apprenticeships where they're basically left doing all the photocopying and the coffee making and very little else. But I was lucky in the organisation that I did my apprenticeship with was very much about setting the apprentices up to succeed in life after the apprenticeship.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds brilliant. I'm just wondering whether to drop this in now. So you mentioned earlier in terms of the success for us, in terms of career fulfillment, about aligning your vocation with your values. So you found that quality is your vocation. So I was just wondering how you see that aligns with your values, or.
So from very early on in life, I was very much a hands-on doing inquisitive person. And when it came to actually doing something, I always wanted to be able to do it to the best of my ability. So you put 100% into it or you don't do it kind of attitude. And when I came out of my apprenticeship and then went into working with another company and progressed along my career, the times that I felt the most satisfaction from the work has been where the company and the role that I'm performing has aligned with my values as a person. And in my company website, I talk very much about integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. That's the quote that I use. And quality assurance is all about integrity. It's about being honest about what you're doing and what you've done. When you find something that's wrong or you see something that's going wrong, that you flag it up so that the end result is consistent, compliant products, which in the medical device industry, which is the industry I come from, is, that's what it's all about. It's all about compliance. It's all about regulatory compliance. It's all about safe and effective products that are going to make a difference in a positive way to a user or to a patient. And so for me, my values are very much around honesty and integrity and maintaining at the forefront that everything that I'm involved in involves people. So it's about not taking it from an aspect of I'm going to create a set of procedures that can dictate how you work. My approach is very much let me understand how you work as a business, how you are currently functioning as a business, And then I'll explain what the evidence your processes need to generate in order to comply with the regulation and the standards. And let me educate you on what the specific requirements are from the standards. And then let's work out how we take your existing process and tweak it to make sure that it ensures that you remain compliant going forwards.
Okay. All right. So how did you find your way into the medical device world then from this kind of large kind of engineering with the foundry company that you were at before?
Well, I actually, when I finished my apprenticeship, I joined a UK office of a German air handling company that specialised in specialised air handling equipment, and none of which I didn't get involved in any medical or pharmaceutical related business at that time, but they did have products that were clean room based. And so I did 4 years with them in a first of all a sales and then a project management role. And then the building boom went bust. So it was like, okay, I could see what's going to happen. I want to move before I get made redundant kind of thing. And I decided actually, as I had really enjoyed being in manufacturing more so than in project management, I then looked for a role into a manufacturing company. And that very first company actually had a medical device in its product portfolio. It had 3 different product streams and medical devices were one of them. And that was in the mid 1990s. So I actually came into the medical device industry at the perfect time because it coincided with the introduction of the EU Medical Device Directive and the UK's incorporation of that into its own regulation. So that gave me a very nice lead in at grassroots level, starting off as a goods inwards inspector and then becoming a quality supervisor. It gave me that introduction into the medical device industry.
Okay, I see. So did you say though that you, in that time, you moved around a little bit and you worked in sales for a little bit in project management? Did you mention that though? As you were moving around then, what was the trigger or what made you feel it's time to move on now, or I feel it's time for a change?
I think I found sales to be, and this was still very much a very male orientated industry I was working in, with heating, ventilating and air conditioning. I've found the sales aspect, it didn't really align with me. The kind of the going in and you almost have to kind of create a persona to be a salesperson. You're having to go in there and you've got your drive from your head office as to which product lines they want you to push. And so there will be times when I would look at a project and go, actually, I don't think any of our products are going to be a great match for your application. But I would suggest you look at potentially this, that, or the other. And of course, you can't do that when you're supposed to be selling your product for your company. They would be a little bit annoyed if you were kind of you want to go with so and so. And on the project management side, I actually did enjoy project management, but because we were such a small part of, I worked on Stansted Airport, I worked on the Royal Academy of Arts, I worked on a certain Middle East dictator's palace, and we were such a small part of the entire chain of different suppliers into these projects that although it was project management, the scope was very limited. And so when the building boom went bust, I looked at it and I thought, okay, I could move to another project management role or another sales role in a different industry, but actually, is that what I want to do? What did I really enjoy doing? And I actually really enjoyed being involved on the manufacturing side. So that's what made me look at a manufacturing role and a quality role within it.
Yeah, I see. And that's how you came back to it. So would you say you shaped a working life that really worked? Do you felt really worked for you then and aligned with your values? How did that pan out?
It took a while. It took a while. So I've been running my consultancy now for 10 years. It was my 10th anniversary in January of this year.
And congratulations.
Thank you. And prior to that, I had worked in ever decreasing time periods with organizations. So what tended to happen was I would go into an organization that needed a fair amount of work doing on their quality management system or compliance within the organization. I would shake things down, get everything running smoothly, and then I'd get bored. And so at that point, I'm bored now. I've done everything that I can to improve the organization. I can't go up any further in the organization. I need a new challenge, and I would move on. And
why is that? Because at that point, the system was in place and it was basically just running it on a more kind of day-to-day, straightforward, right?
It was down to kicking the tires and checking the oil, which it didn't really, it took the satisfaction away for me. And so I found myself in December 2014 in a situation where I had the opportunity to set up my own business. And at that point, I had been attending conferences and listening to medical device startup entrepreneurs wailing and gnashing their teeth about the fact that they thought they were 6 months from putting their product on the market, only to then discover that there's this thing called regulatory approval, which requires you to have a quality management system in place, which has to be certified. And they didn't know what they didn't know, as George W. Bush said, we don't know what we don't know. And so they arrived at this point where they had told their investors we're going to have a product in the market in 6 months, and actually that they had no chance of that happening. So I identified that there was this gap that wasn't currently being filled in the market for medical device startups, entrepreneurs, university spin-outs, academics who wanted to develop a medical device, couldn't afford at that point to actually employ somebody as or regulatory person within the organization, because you need a touch of each. And so therefore we're struggling to actually do this very key strategy planning at the very early stage. So I took on a permanent role part-time for 20 hours a week with one company and used the other 20 hours a week to set up my business. So the first year was mostly contracting, so mostly stepping in where a quality manager or regulatory manager had gone on sick leave, maternity leave, or there was a gap. So filling those gaps. It probably took me until the end of my second year to actually sit down and really define what I wanted to offer as a service. And so actually, I don't want to be contracting, I want to be consulting. So I want to be going in there and actually either creating the environment and the infrastructure that's required to be compliant, or to help take an existing system and improve it. I don't want to be going in and just being a stopgap quality manager or a stopgap regulatory manager through that role. Even once I'd actually got to the point of saying, I want to set up my own business to do this, which really ticked all of my boxes. It was also, once I'd actually done that, living the role, doing the job, and then defining exactly what I wanted to be as a business.
Okay, so what I'm interested about here is, so the type of businesses that you work with, their medical startups, what are the things that they think they need when they're hiring you, and then what do they actually need?
Okay, that's an interesting one. So I work with quite a variety and combination. So I've got 3 sole entrepreneur femtech medical device startups I work with. They were literally, so one lady she's developing a class 1 medical device as literally a side hustle. She's doing it entirely off her own back in a spare time with her own funding. I've got another one who's a student at Loughborough University who's actually doing it as part of her dissertation project. Right up to, I've recently taken on a startup client who are 68 staff. They're at the prototyping stage of their medical device, and they've got a quality manager in place, but they just needed some extra support as they approach certification of their quality management system. So I have quite a range of I also work with a lot of universities in their spin-outs and in their what they call their incubators, so where the spin-out projects start off in, as well as directly with clinicians and academics who are working on their own to develop products. And all of my clients are direct personal recommendations from previous clients. So I have never had to market myself. I've never had to go out there and actually find work. If anything, I turn work down. I will always take a call with a potential client, but if I don't have the bandwidth to accommodate them, then I will try to connect them with somebody in my network who I think might be able to meet their needs. But going back to the kind of core values thing about honesty and integrity, if I take an initial call with a potential client and I genuinely don't think that they've got a medical device, if for whatever reason, maybe they're trying to reinvent a wheel that's already been out there for 20, 30 years, there's already a very well established market with 2 or 3 market leaders, I will be very honest with them. I'll say to them, I appreciate that you've put a lot of time and effort into this. What is it that's going to make your product? What's going to differentiate your product from these other products on the market? Have you actually communicated with your potential customers, your end users, to make sure you've incorporated all of their wants and needs as requirements into your product? Because if you haven't done that, you could find yourself going to market with a product that there is no market for. I have seen companies that have gone to market with a product which has been developed on the whim of an academic. And when they've gone to market with it, it turns out that nobody else is interested in the product. So what was to them the best thing since sliced bread, nobody else in the market wants to buy. So yeah, I will have that it's quite a brutal conversation to have. I do try to deliver it as diplomatically.
So if you're enjoying this episode, please give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That would help us to keep bringing authentic manufacturing conversations with the people who are shaping our industry. Thank you. So I'd like to, as we've started to get into this and some of the quality management side, I do a section called Myths and Truths. So I'm going to say some statements, and I'd just like you to tell me if you think it's a myth or it's a truth, and maybe why. So compliance is just about ticking check boxes.
That's a tricky one. So compliance is about consistency. Compliance is about making sure that everybody's doing everything the same way, so that every product that comes out of that process, whether it's design, development, or manufacture or testing, is the same and achieves the intended acceptance criteria, meets the acceptance criteria that's been set as part of the design. So are there check boxes involved? Invariably, yes, because you have to generate the evidence that that product is conforming. Same goes for the people. The people have to be trained and competent to be able to deliver that product. So is there a checkbox exercise there in ensuring that the training has been completed? Yes. But it goes beyond that. There's a tendency for quality control to be very checkboxy. It's about making people tick boxes to say, yes, this conforms, or recording a result that demonstrates it conforms. On the bad side, that can lead to complacency. That can lead to inadvertently ticking that something's passed when it hasn't. But on a good side, it makes sure that you don't have that human error that can creep in where somebody can just forget to do something. So I would say it's a necessary evil, perhaps, of quality control systems. But done correctly, it shouldn't hinder the process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nicely handled. Nicely answered there. Okay. So what about quality systems should fit the people, not the other way around?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. Your quality management system should reflect the culture of the organization and the way the organization works. I have followed other medical device consultants into companies where a consultant has gone in literally with a USB stick with prepared procedures, etc. on, and they've just literally name changed the whole thing, swapped the company logo over, and it's there you go, can I have my money, please? And it doesn't take long for the organization to then discover that it doesn't quite gel with how they work. It doesn't quite reflect their workflow. There might be something missing, or there might be something in a procedure that they don't understand, but all of a sudden now that they've put these procedures in, they've got to comply with them. So my approach is always to actually understand the business first, let them understand what evidence their process needs to generate that will guarantee conformity and compliance with the regulations and the standards, and then work together to document that process. And that can be in the form of a process flow with very little words. It could be a highly detailed 30-page procedure, which I definitely don't like, but I recognize that in some organizations, that's what they like, that's what they want. I tend to try to suggest in that scenario, go for a higher level kind of description of the process and feed into it with the very detailed descriptive narrative as supporting documents, work instructions, or other procedures, rather than having a really super chunky procedure that people are going to struggle to necessarily read through and comprehend. The quality management system has to facilitate the business in delivering safe and effective products. And so it's got to fit with the business. It's got to fit with the people and fit with the business.
So the outcomes of the quality management system, they remain fixed in the documentation or the checks that are needed, but you think it's important to form that system around the company to make it more likely that they're going to stick to it and use it, basically.
Absolutely. If the company's team are actually involved in documenting their processes, because they're not, I don't say writing a procedure or writing a process, because they're not, they're actually documenting what they do. My job is then to make sure that what they're doing meets all the requirements of the standards and regulations, and to explain if there's a gap, to explain, not explain how to fill the gap, but to explain what evidence they need to the gap to produce. And then they work themselves on filling that gap.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. A couple more of these, slightly more based on your career. You can outgrow a role, even if you're good at it.
Are you outgrowing the role, or are you outgrowing the company? So one of the most true things I've heard said about the reason why people leave jobs and go to another company. You don't leave a company, you don't leave a job, you leave a person. And I know this from my own experience that you get to a point in a job or a role in an organization where either you feel that you cannot progress up any further. So in that case, you've possibly outgrown the company, or there is an opportunity for you to grow up or across, but that's being blocked by a person. And they may be blocking it for what they think is a really great reason, is that you're great at your job and they want you to stay in that job forever. But in that situation, they're actually blocking you. So you've outgrown the role, but you're being held back by outgrowing your manager, outgrowing your line manager, their ability to deploy you within a business. So when I've been in a managerial position myself, when I've been looking at the personal development of my team, I didn't stick it to just looking at what they were doing in the organization. I had a member of my team once who had to put an awful lot more effort into achieving the performance requirements of the role, which meant putting in extra hours off their own time to achieve it, but for which they were very well rewarded in the way of performance bonuses. And I had a long conversation with them about it. And I said, if you want to keep getting these bonuses, you've got to keep this level of pressure on yourself to achieve that, because this is not something which naturally aligns with your skills. But you've proven that when you put the pressure on yourself, you can achieve it. However, there's a price to pay for these extra hours you're doing and the extra pressure you're putting on yourself. And so I got to understand what it was that they actually really wanted to do in life. And it was nothing to do with the job that they were in. And so from a personal development perspective, I said, we've trained you with everything that you need to do your current job, but I want to keep developing you so that you've got an option. So if you choose to stick at this job and keep putting these extra hours in off your own back so you get the remuneration, I also want to give you something extra as well. So I actually arranged for him to do a project management course, which was nothing to do with the role that he was in. But what he wanted to do in life, he wanted to be a property developer. And so project management was going to be a key skill that he would use if he got to the point of becoming a property developer. And so sometimes as a manager, it's not just about valuing your people for their fit like a jigsaw piece in a puzzle. Because as long as they fit the requirements for your job, that's great. But you need to look wider. What's going to keep them in this job for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What are their long-term career progression? What is it that they in their heart actually want to do? And if it's not something that's actually aligned with the current job, but they want to carry on doing the current job, what can you do as a manager to actually help to build a skill set that will actually support them outside of that? So it might be doing something like, it could be giving them funding to do a language course. Maybe they want to learn a new language. Maybe they want to learn a new skill like coding. Maybe giving them one day off a year or twice a year to go and volunteer on something. I know a lot of companies do that nowadays. They have these schemes whereby you can put volunteer hours in, which are paid by the company for you to go and work with an organization. So rather than allowing your team to outgrow their role, look at how you can actually enhance their life outside of the company and outside of the role to balance up that commitment they're putting into being good at their job.
Yeah, so that's an interesting way to see what ways there are that you can make overlaps between the direction they want to go in, what you need them to do, so that you both win. Yeah. That's interesting. I've got a couple of interesting questions to go to off the back of that one. Okay, let's go with this one, because I'm interested in work-life balance, and I thought it was interesting that you mentioned in that previous example that kind of member of your team was having to put in extra hours to get to the point, to get to the kind of the standard that he needed to be at. So do you think work-life balance only comes once you've made it in your career, once you're competent and successful at what you're doing?
I think work-life balance is something that perhaps the younger generation, the people in their 20s and 30s, value the work more than the balance. There's a drive and a desire to get up that ladder as quickly as possible without recognizing the impact that has on them mentally and physically to actually achieve that. I've definitely worked in companies and worked in jobs where I've put way too much in the way of work, which was quite detrimental to me at the time. And it wasn't really until I established my own business and probably got 3 to 4 years into that business. So the first 2 years, I was saying yes to everything, which is never a good thing. Year three came very close to burning out because I just overcommitted myself. Do I take holidays? No. Do I take weekends off? Almost all the time now, which is good. My working hours now are closer to 40 to 50 a week rather than the 80 to 100 a week they have been in the past. I don't like taking holidays. It's really weird. I don't know why. I just don't like taking a break. My clients, I have at the moment 14 clients, and they're all at different stages, so they've all got different needs. So it's a bit like having 14 children. So all of my clients have different needs. Some of them might have an urgent need. Some of them won't ever have an urgent need, but I remain in touch with them. So I do try to schedule at least 2 or 3 times a year. I'll try and schedule a week off, which I'll go and predominantly spend down the allotment. But getting that balance, sometimes getting the work-life balance is not about hard work versus slacking off. Sometimes, or hard work versus rest. So for me personally, it took a little while to figure out that actually I recuperate better when I'm as busy outside of work as I am inside work. So, for example, I love this. Somebody said to me, "Oh, what are your hobbies? What do you do outside of work?" Okay, so sit down. This is a long list. So I'm chair of the parish council. I'm vice chair of the recreation committee. I'm a trustee in 2 charitable trusts. I'm chair of the Norfolk and Norwich Bat Group. I'm a bat rescuer. I'm a park run event director and run director. I'm a scoutmaster. I have an allotment. I have 3 Cocker Spaniels, one of which is a flyball competitor, a cat and a husband.
I noticed that the husband comes at the bottom of that list of priorities. Yeah. I imagine
that's not on a priority basis. That's not on a priority basis. No, I am absolutely blessed with a husband who is pragmatic. He's from the Midlands, so he's very down to earth. He's very quick to call me out when I overstep the line on anything, but he's very pragmatic. So we do not live in each other's pockets. We very much have our own hobbies and things that we do in our own different areas, but we also have, at the very obviously core to a marriage, we have a lot that we do together. But yeah, so for me, I have to have that balance. That for me is balance, being busy when I'm not working and busy when I am working. That's what gives me my balance. Now, for some people, it's the opposite of that. If they're going to put 100% in at work, they need to be doing 9 to 5, and then their evenings are theirs, and they socialise, or they do the 2-week, 3-week holiday in Bali, whatever it is that floats their boat. So my advice to people in their 20s and 30s is your career and your life is a long game. Yes, it's great to have those long-term ambitions, but you need to make sure that you maintain what for you is an appropriate balance as you go through those different stages. And there may be a stage where it is perfectly fine for you to put 100% into work and have those holidays. And other times it may be that you've got to put, I hate to say more than 100% because you can't put more than 100% in. There's times where you do have to put the extra hours in, the extra work in to maybe prove yourself in an acting role before you get promoted, things like that. So I think it's not a one thing that fits throughout your entire career. It will change. Your needs will change as you go through your career.
Yeah, plan for the long game. It's not a sprint.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting that way. I'm just wondering what it is that energizes you or replenishes your energy levels by having that huge list of outdoor activities. I've got to be honest, to me, that sounds very great. Like my relaxation method is sailing and floating around a lake gently and quietly when there's barely no wind around at the weekends. Running 10 different committees sounds like a nightmare to me. So what is it that energizes you about doing those things?
So I take something different from all of them. So, for example, working in the parish or being chair for the parish council, we've lived in this village since May 2017. I became a councillor in 2020, vice chair in 2022 and chair in 2023. And for me, it was, first of all, it was about putting something back into the community because people really don't understand what parish councils are responsible for and what they do. An effective parish council is like an effective senior management team of an organisation. And an effective parish council means that everything ticks along in the village, everything ticks along in the small town. Needs are anticipated and met in advance. When anything does go wrong, we're very quick to get the appropriate authorities in to resolve it. So actually seeing the village grow, seeing the village prosper, seeing people in the village happy about things, that gives you that reward. The bat rescue, I love bats, and actually being trained up as a rescuer, being able to rescue bats. I actually, tail end of last year, I had 2 Barbastelle bats come into me for care, and they're an extremely rare bat. And there's an area in Norfolk that actually houses 80% of the UK's total population of Barbastelle bats. So to actually have a bat that rare and to have 2 of them come in 2 weeks apart in my care, it was amazing. It was like, oh, I'm like David Attenborough. And to actually then see them nursed back to health and released, that's fantastic, because occasionally you do get the ones that don't make it, which is very sad. But
okay, sorry, you need to, I'm visualizing the bat rescue, but I'm struggling to be honest. How does a bat rescue work, and how do you nurse a bat back to health?
No worries. So what tends to happen is somebody will find a bat. Either a pet will bring it in, or they'll go down to the kitchen in the morning, there'll be one in the sink, or they'll find one attached to the outside of the house, or they'll disturb one from a shed or something. And they panic and they Google, I found a bat, and they get the Bat Conservation Helpline number from London. They ring the Bat Conservation Helpline. The helpline has a list of all the bat ambulance drivers and the bat rescuers. And so they will look to see which the 2 nearest people in that organisation that are to where the bat has been found, and they will give they'll give those contact numbers to the person who's found the bat. They then, so I'm used to, and they've started already, so I get the calls. Well, hello, is that Samantha? I've been given your number by the Bat Conservation Trust. Okay. And so my job in that situation is to find out the circumstances in which the bat was found, make an assessment as well, see whether they can bring the bat to me first and foremost. Otherwise, you can do an awful lot of mileage picking bats up. And then to actually get to the bat. In the summer, quite often bats get dehydrated. So quite often they will ground themselves. So they will drop to the ground and they will crawl up a wall or something, which is where you'll spot them. And in those circumstances, actually just going out to where the bat is, taking some water, taking my special little drug dealer style tiny little weighing scales and my calipers, so I can measure the wing length, which will tell me how old the bat is. So I will go out and I'll assess the bat, and I will give the bat some hydration. I might give the bat some food, and then see if it perks up enough to be able to fly off under its own energy. If I get there and it's obviously injured or it's ill, or if it doesn't recover whilst I'm there, I will then bring it back. So baby bats, the less than a week old, they have no fur, and they get carried around everywhere by the mum. So they can be dropped by the mum when the mum's out hunting. So with those, we try to reunite them back with the mum the same day. So this means going out with a special piece of kit. So we have a little electric heated pad with a little towel that goes over the front, which goes onto a little vertically mounted platform. We determine where the bat flight path is from the roost, and we will put the baby out on this apparatus in the hope that the mum will hear it calling, and we'll actually pick the baby up and take it back in, which happens. If we know where the roost is, but the mum doesn't pick the bat up, there are some volunteers who are licensed to be able to put the bat back in the roost. I'm not licensed, so I'm not allowed to do that, but I could put the bat on the wall below the roost and see if it makes its own way in. If once a baby bat is 3 weeks old, it's got fur, it's practicing flying, so sometimes they get found outside of the roost because they'll fly out of the roost and get lost, in which case we will just make sure that they're fed, make sure they're watered, wait until they're more proficient at flying, and then release them back where they were found. Adult bats that are injured, some injuries we're able to deal with, so wing lacerations, which are usually cat attacks, things like that we can deal with. A broken wing, a broken arm bone in a wing, or a broken finger bone in a wing usually means the bat needs to be euthanized because you can't splint them. So there's a varying scale of care that's required for the bats. Some bats come in, we have them for 24 hours, we go out, we release them and they're absolutely fine. Some come in, we have them for maybe a couple of weeks whilst they're on antibiotics, whilst a wing tear heals. And some bats get held for a lot longer. They tend to go to a different carer in Norfolk who's got long-term back care facilities, which I don't have.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and I can see how that complete attention you would have to put and the care you would have to put in that would get you out of the work routine 100%, wouldn't it? So yeah, I can see how that is a really enjoyable, rewarding thing. So
But I absolutely
that
love
sounds
weeding.
brilliant.
I love weeding. It's almost like a form of walking meditation. It's like kneeling and picking meditation. So where you're happy sitting on your boat, idly watching the wildfowls, etc., around you, I can go down my allotment and stick an Audible book on and quite happily sit there and weed for hours at a time. And weeding and digging, that's my favourite bit down the allotment.
Yeah, very soothing. That sounds good. Okay, thank you, Sam. Thank you for your time so far. Some kind of closing thoughts. When you think of the future, either for your business or for the industry, what are you hopeful for over the next few years?
For my business, I hope to continue in where I am at. I've found my niche. I'm very comfortable with the service offering that I make. So it all aligns with my personal values. I'm very happy with my client base. I've got some fantastic clients. I work with some really groundbreaking medical tech. And I get to see some amazing success. One of my clients got bought last year by Olympus for £66.3 million, which was fantastic for what was a university spin out from about 7 years previous to that. For the industry, we've been hit hard by Brexit. The medical device industry in the UK got hit really hard by Brexit because we got splintered off from a regulatory comfort zone around having the European medical device regulation, or the medical device directive before it became regulation, meant that consistent playing field across the whole of Europe, including the UK. And the Northern Ireland Agreement, the splitting up, we've got England, Scotland and Wales come under one form of regulation for medical devices if you wish to export or import with Europe. Northern Ireland is under a different agreement. There's a huge amount of complexity and confusion still, all this time after Brexit on that front. The MHRA has still not actually released what the revised UK regulation is going to be. Common sense would dictate it needs to align as much with Europe as possible to reduce any barriers, but we still don't know what it looks like. A lot of industry was thinking during the Brexit run-up, they're going to go with mutual recognition for the European regs on medical devices because it would be stupid not to. Brexit happened and we didn't. We broke away from it and industry just went, what the hell are we going to do now? How are we supposed to operate now? So for the industry, personally, I would like to see the UK mutually recognise the EU medical device regulations because it would take all those barriers away. It would resolve the kind of splintering off of Northern Ireland. It would make life just so much easier. However, the database that on which everything in the EU MDR sits is still not fully functional. It was supposed to have been introduced in 1997, so we're not holding our breath on that one because it's still not fully implemented and functional yet. And even Europe is now looking back at its regulations saying this is a little bit dysfunctional in places. So there's not a great quick and easy win for the UK medical device industry. I think there is still strong growth. I'm certainly seeing strong growth. I'm seeing a lot of focus on software as a medical device, which has the potential to really make a difference both to the NHS and to patients because it will speed up diagnosis, it will speed up patient treatment. And I think that's very much something we've got to embrace as a country. We need that. We need to take the grunt work out of managing patients on their diagnostic pathway and the treatment pathways, which is very much heavily dependent on human beings reviewing images, writing reports. We need to pick the pace up on that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Let's hope there's some kind of clarity within that. Thank you. I'd just like to find out a little bit about how people can find out more about you. I then have one final thought question that I'd just like to squeeze in. But yeah, first off, if people want to find out more about you, what's the best, or your company, what's the best way to do that?
I've got a really nice, short, snappy email address, which is sam@sqms.org.uk. And my website is www.sqms.org.uk. And I'm on LinkedIn under Samantha Shelley, and my business, Shelley Quality Management Services, is also on LinkedIn as well. I've done a series of talking head bits for a company called Cognidoc, so they quite often pop up. This is about the fourth podcast that I've done now with other organizations. So I do pop up occasionally on LinkedIn in little video clips. But I'm always happy to talk. If there's people out there who are thinking, I've got an idea for a medical device, but I don't know where to start, I'm always more than willing to have that conversation to say, this is what it looks like to be a medical device developer, a medical device manufacturer. These are things you need to be thinking about before you even start investing in concept and feasibility work. That's why I do a lot of work with universities. I get the opportunity to talk to students who might be thinking, I think that this could be something I want to take a bit further.
Yeah. You're a good first stop for a sense check on those kind of ideas. That sounds great. So thank you. The final question I just wanted that just came to mind on one last point that you were mentioning there. You said that you felt you'd found the perfect fit between your vocation and values in the business that you're doing now and what you're doing now. I was just wondering if you might have some advice of someone who's maybe in a job that they're not feeling 100% is right for them. Maybe they're feeling a little bit of a disconnect. What would you say one small step that they could take to start moving in a better direction for themselves?
One small step. That's going to be a tricky one to bring down to one small step. I think they need to be realistic about their objectives, and they need to be clear in their objectives. So I think if you take the time to sit down and write down what your short, medium, and long-term objectives are, because sometimes you will need to compromise. Sometimes you will need to work in a job that doesn't align with your values and which you feel is very much a job. You go there to do a job of work. You may not feel you get a huge amount of satisfaction from it. However, if that is a stepping stone in your path, that may be something that you need to do. So being realistic about your objectives and how you're going to achieve those objectives is key. I find if I'm stuck, I've found where I've been in a role and I thought, nah, I'm not so sure on this. Going really right back to basics. What's my short, medium, and long-term objective? What's the pros and cons of staying in the job? What's the pros and cons in leaving the job? Actually write it down, reread it, think it over. My mother was absolutely aghast when I left the company I did my apprenticeship. Oh, you've done your apprenticeship. She worked in one job her entire life. They put all of this time and money into you doing your apprenticeship. Why on earth would you walk away from that? And it took me a while I've had a couple of jobs where I've gone into the job, I've got to the end of the probationary period, and I thought, actually, no, this is not the job for me. And in one of those jobs, I actually identified somebody else within the organization who wanted that role and who actually was going to be a better fit for that role than I ever would have been. And so I went to my boss and to HR and I said, actually, no, this is not the job for me. Because a lot of people tend to forget that probationary period is for you as well. It's for you to judge if you're a good fit in that organization, not just for them to judge whether you're a good fit into them. And so I approached it pragmatically. Before the end of the probationary period, I had the conversation with my manager to say, this is not a great fit for me. I appreciate the opportunity that you've given me. However, I found somebody in the organization who I think would be a much better fit. And so I actually helped them the transition was seamless. That's one thing I've always done. Even when I've left a job that I've got to the point where I couldn't stick it, I really hated the job, I hated the people, I've always worked as hard as I can to make sure that the job description very accurately reflects what the role actually involves, because a lot of companies don't have great job descriptions and potentially even got involved in the selection process for getting a replacement.
Comes down to the integrity again, doesn't it? Making sure you've done what you can so that it's that it's a win for everyone. There's no point sticking around if it's not good for you and it's not going to work out as good for your managers or the team around you.
Yeah. I think if you look at it from the perspective of an employer, if an employer is concerned about your performance, as an organization, they should have a disciplinary procedure or a performance management procedure where they highlight the gap in your performance against their expectations. And they work with you to give you an opportunity to fill that gap and bring your performance up to where they expect it. But it's the same way the other way around. So if you're not happy in a job, and this can be really hard for the guys in the 20s and 30s, if you're not happy in the job, talk to your manager. Talk to your line manager about it. Don't be scared to say, this is not turning out the way I thought it would. Because it may be that there are changes that they can make that will actually make the job more suitable for you. Or they may say, actually, no, we've noticed that you're not happy in the role too, but we think there's another role over here you might want to try. It may reach the point where you decide that you want to leave, or it may be that they offer you an opportunity that changes your mind about leaving.
Yeah, it's worth a conversation, isn't it? Rather than just saying nothing and handing your notice in one day. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Great. All right. Great advice, Sam. Really appreciate that. Let's leave it there, but that was brilliant, Sam. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me to be part of it.